Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for being here to celebrate the launch of my new book, Answers for Ethical Marketers. Well, it certainly takes a village to write a book, and I have a bunch of villagers to thank. I'm going to keep it short, but I do want to give shout outs, of course, to my family. My goodness, for the support, the love, the encouragement, especially when the writing, there were deadlines and they were tight. To the Routledge publishing team, Meredith Norwich, my senior editor, and her team of talented professionals. You made everything just go so smoothly and flow. And as an author, that is greatly appreciated. And then there are so many contributors to this book, so many to thank. I could not have done this without you. Your insights and knowledge enrich the pages of my book. And we actually have a few contributors, special guests, here this evening, because we're going to dive into an ethics conversation, and we're going to uncover just who is the ethical marketer. And I think this is a good place to make the first introduction. I have a co-host this evening, Richard Bistrong, who wrote the foreword to my book. And Richard is very well known in the ethics and compliance space. But rather than me going through a whole bunch of credentials and accolades, I'm going to play a little video so you can learn about Richard, and then you'll meet him on the other side.
Let's talk about the dark side of international business.
Richard Bistrong is a former corporate executive who was convicted of international bribery and served more than a year in prison, but he cooperated with the government and went undercover to expose other crimes, and he is now an anti-bribery consultant, and we appreciate you joining us.
You run this firm right now, but one of the reasons you run it is because you were involved in a corruption scandal. You were a wire for the feds. You served time, and now you do consulting.
So what would have stopped me? That's the one I had 14 and a half months in prison to think about. I didn't appreciate that just by nodding my head, I've created liability across the entire enterprise.
So how about we use our time together to surface some unknowns and make some difficult issues discussable?
Hello, Richard.
Deirdre, hello from New York City, and welcome to everyone. It's such an honor and pleasure to join you for the launch and the live stream of Answers for Ethical Marketers.
Thank you. Thank you. It's great to have you here to tap into your knowledge. And I see that you got the memo with the wardrobe. You couldn't be matched more perfectly to the book cover. So I thank you for that, too.
I got the memo.
You sure did. Well, Richard, why don't we start just by giving everybody a little context? So introduce the book, Answers for Ethical Marketers, but let's make sure that everybody understands who is the ethical marketer today. So I'm going to kick that one to you first.
Well, thank you, Deirdre. And I don't want to have too much of a spoiler alert from the introduction, and thank you for the opportunity to write it. But everyone is an ethical marketer, no matter what department or role you're in. That could be in marketing department, that could be in business development. Everyone in an organization is the voice of that organization's responsible and ethical business practices. So it's not a support function responsibility. It's everyone's responsibility.
Well, I feel exactly the same way. And sometimes I often wonder, because in certain circles, it's pushed into marketing or PR, where because it's communication, the folks who are managing the communication automatically are seen as the ethics police, the conscience of the organization, when in essence, your leadership has to be there, HR has to be there, but then it permeates out and hits every level and every single professional. Are you finding through your journey, because I know you do a lot of work with companies, that people are understanding that and it's becoming a part of culture?
They are. They're appreciating that the legal, and we'll talk to Sheila a little bit about this, the legal and compliance department can build the best ethics and compliance and risk platform. But if that's not coming through the voice of business, through the corporate narrative, not just the legal or marketing one, then everyone's going to think, well, doing what's right is a support function around here. So we're a little bit on an ethics and compliance journey, but it's heading in the right direction, where I think everyone really now appreciates that those external marketing values that we're trying to convince the world, right, what our wonderful brand and value proposition, that also needs to be a part of internal culture. So I think there is an appreciation that this is a global and it's a workforce responsibility, not a marketing or a compliance one.
That is a great point. You mentioned values, and I always stress that values, your ethics and values, are a personal choice, and it's also a business practice. And for all of the students coming into the business world and young professionals, you have a set of values. You do not leave them at the doorstep of your organization. And you should align with the business. And when that happens, you take your ethics, your values, and your ethical conduct goes wherever you go. And it's through every conversation and every interaction. And for me, the ethical marketer is the person who shows up with that good purpose to serve. It's someone who does it with care and respect and transparency. And it goes by the do no harm, right? If we all walked around with the do no harm, I think that we'd see a lot of ethical conduct. So do you feel the same way? Is that the values meet with the company?
Absolutely. I mean, having your personal values align with your organizational values, as Ken's contribution addresses, and I thought it was an inspiring contribution. I mean, that's so significant because we don't feel tension between our own principles, our own purpose, and our own values, and that of our organization. And such a wonderful part of your book, Deirdre, is there's some great actionable advice about what happens when maybe there's a little misalignment, or what do you do when you're not sure about what the right ethical decision is? So the book is just filled with how do we fill those gaps, because they inevitably exist.
Well, thank you. Thank you for saying that. You mentioned Ken, and that's actually our first special guest who's going to join the broadcast. But before we introduce Ken, just a little housekeeping for everybody, for all of you, wherever you're watching. So you might be on YouTube. This is also being streamed through my Facebook business page. You can ask your questions in the comments area, because we have somebody who is going to be gathering those comments, and we'll answer them at the end. So we'll go through all of our Q&A together and answer a whole bunch of questions, but then we'd love to hear from you at the end, because that's when we're going to bring all of our special guests together. So with that said, I would like to introduce Ken Jacobs, who is the founder and CEO of Jacobs Consulting and Executive Coaching. And Ken, prior to his business that he launched, was in the agency, PR agency world as a leader for about 20 years. And I'm going to keep it brief, and we are going to have Ken join us.
Hello.
Hello. Hi, Ken.
Greetings from one of the villagers.
Yes, thank you, villager. Great to see you got the memo about the blue shirt.
No, you sent me the message through the universe.
Oh, that's good.
We're connected that way.
We're so connected. Well, Ken, in the spirit of the book, which is a Q&A, of course, we're going to ask you a couple questions. So, Richard, maybe you can kick us off.
Okay, well, Ken, a pleasure to meet you. Thank you for joining us. And Ken, you work with a lot of agency leaders. So if you believe that your organization has acted unethically, what question, or maybe a couple of questions, should you immediately ask to help you navigate what could be a really challenging and difficult situation?
Yeah. Well, as a coach, I'm a big believer in the power of perception. So the first thing we do is look at and say, was there an ethics violation? Is this just my perception of the situation? What's another possible perception? What's another? Let's be really sure before we believe our organization has acted unethically. The next thing to look at is, did they violate the company's ethics policy or my own? Many of us hold family and friends and clients and our companies to a contract that they've never signed. So, you've got to look at, is it our ethics that have been violated, or is it simply mine? Now, if it doesn't appear they violated the company ethics, but they violated our own, that's a very good time to do an inventory and do an assessment and say, is there a gap between the ethical values of where I'm currently working and my own deeply felt ethical values? And I think, during last year was kind of a strange year, like one none of us had experienced. I think people stayed in positions when there might have been a gap in ethics because just for the security of having a job, unfortunately. But I think now is a very good time to look at your own values and your company's and make sure they're in alignment. They don't all have to be in alignment, but the ones around, the important ones and ethics, that's something we need to look at. And I'm so glad in the book, the word ethics comes before marketing. Ethics is everything. Ethics is our reputation. You can grow your business. You can be of service. What matters is, have you lived ethically? The last thing is, if you do think there's been an ethical violation, you need to understand, what are the rules with HR? What are the rules for reporting it? Am I guaranteed confidentiality? What is the policy and how will it be handled? I think you have to open your eyes and know that before you ring the bell.
Absolutely. Really helpful questions. And one thing, perception is so difficult and gauging different perceptions. So Ken, and I have another question for you, but this just begs a question. Would you ask other people around you to possibly share what they thought so that you're not making a choice alone on the perception?
My instinct is to be a little careful around that, because you never know who works for whom, who reports to whom, who keep a confidence. Confidence is so important. I think early on in your career, one should have a board of advisors, a mentor or two, a coach, of course, whatever the case may be. And I would discuss it first with your own inner circle before deciding what action to take at your organization.
Yeah, Richard, I see you nodding. So you're in a lot of corporate spaces. You can agree with this.
Absolutely. I mean, I think Ken's focus on the importance of making sure that your principles and values are aligned with your organizational values. And if there's some space, as he well shares, it might be time for some introspective thinking. I think that's great counsel. And as he also shares, the flip side is that when everything is aligned, I mean, it's just wonderful. You're so much more engaged, motivated, passionate. We just love our work like we do now. So I think that, when he also shares that not all ethical decisions are easy. I mean, that was such an important takeaway for me. And I would add to that, some can be pretty tricky, which goes back to a theme in your book, Deirdre, which is the importance, and Ken talked about it, of having mentors, having that sort of private board of directors that you can go to.
Yes, that is critically important. And Ken, another part of your contribution talked about the North Star, having your own North Star. Maybe share a little bit, break it down. How do you find the North Star?
Yeah, I think it's knowing what you stand for, knowing what's really important to you, and being very loyal to that and very true to that. And my favorite story or anecdote or scene about that is at the very end of The Devil Wears Prada, which of course everyone knows is based on a real story. And Miranda, played by the wonderful Meryl Streep, says to Andy, "Oh, I see a lot of myself in you, the way you handled a certain situation." And it was that, Andy took a gig in Paris that Emily Blunt, the actress, really wanted. And Meryl Streep had her do an unethical move. Meryl Streep wouldn't tell her not to go. It was her position. And ultimately, she was talking about how Meryl Streep had done something to a certain character, and Andy said, "Oh, I could never do that." And she said, "But you did it. You did it to Emily Blunt." And Andy gets very mad, and Andy leaves the limo, and Andy throws her mobile phone in this beautiful fountain in Paris. And I always, and it's because she's realized, and Miranda has helped her realize, she's lost her ethical North Star. She's no longer being true to those very critical values. So she's, I think some people see this scene and think she's angry at Miranda. She's not.
No.
She's angry at herself for having lost her way. And we have to find our way back to our own ethical values, as Richard clearly did in his life. And what an inspiring story that is for all of us, truly.
Thank you.
Absolutely. The ethical North Star, I think I talk about this a little bit in the book. I call it your ethics GPS. And this GPS, it's always there. It's just sometimes we don't recognize it being there because we get caught up in whatever's going on in our world. It could be the fast pace of business. It could be social media, technology, binging and pinging at us. And you can lose this. It doesn't necessarily go away, but you're not tuned into it.
Yeah, so if you're rationalizing, that's what that is all about. And I think to the point raised earlier, it is tough to live an ethical life in business and to be true to your own moral code and ethical code. But it is so important to do so and know what your values are. Again, they don't have to fully align with the organizations, but on the big stuff, on the deep stuff, how we conduct our business, on how we treat people and clients and our communities that we serve. You've got to have alignment there. And if it's not, it's time to maybe consider another organization. Because I think, as Richard said, when you're in alignment and when that is there, it's so much more fulfilling. It's so much more engaging. You love your work. And that ultimately is, I think, what we all want, regardless of whether we're in high finance, branding, marketing, coaching, whatever the case may be.
Right. Jerry Corbett made a comment on my LinkedIn today, and his quote sort of spoke to what you said. When you're in alignment with ethics, life is satisfaction, it's success, and everything good that goes along with it. So all really great points. And I just want to give shout outs to friends who are watching. So Russ, Hedge, thank you for being here. Shanali, Wendy, Faye, hello, Jonna. Oh my goodness. And Winnie's there, and Winnie's going to come on and chat a little later. And Robin's there too. Thank you all. And whoever else is there, we really appreciate it. So Ken, thank you very much for sharing. Anything you want to say before we pop you back in the green room?
With me, it's always about a laugh. And I'm just going to share with everyone that I think Shanali only tuned in to see if I do some chair dancing. And I'm not going to, because this is too serious a topic. But Shanali, I know that's what you're thinking. No, I just want to thank you both. It's such an important dialogue to have. And I'm really honored that you asked me to participate, and we'll see you all again at 8 o'clock.
See you again soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you both.
Okay. And now we have another guest, Richard, who's joining us. We're going to have Martin Waxman come into the broadcast. And Martin is the president of Martin Waxman Communications. He's also a LinkedIn Learning instructor like me. And Martin is, and I want to make sure I get this right. He is he's a professor, adjunct professor at Schulich School of Business at McMaster University. So Martin, welcome.
Really nice to be here. Thank you. And I too got the memo about the book cover. You know what? I know that whenever there's book launch, you always dress as the cover. So
there you go. Well, thank you for that. It's so nice to have you with us, Martin.
Yeah, great to be here. And nice to meet you, Richard.
Martin, pleasure. Thank you. Great to have you here.
This is truly a wonderful celebration. And Martin, in the spirit, once again, of Q&A, we've got questions for you. So are you ready?
Yes, hopefully I'll have an answer.
Okay. Well, Richard, go for it.
So Martin, I hope it's an answerable question. What is the best piece of advice a mentor has shared with you about ethics in communications?
I think I have a really good answer, and it's one I wish I'd thought of myself. My mentor is a gentleman named Michael Meath, who had a long and successful career counseling CEOs and organizations, and who I met not too long ago when I went back to school to do my Master of Communications Management as part of the McMaster and Syracuse degree. And Michael taught an ethics course. And here, I've been in the practice a few years myself, and I thought I knew how to be ethical because I consider myself the way many of us do, an ethical person. And yet one thing I realized is that I lacked the system to be able to make an ethical decision. So a framework to build it on. And one of the things Michael said, the beginning of that framework is you always hit the pause button. Hit the pause button. 4 words, but very, very powerful words, because what you need to do is you need to just stop. Everything's going quickly. Oftentimes you're in the middle of a crisis. And if you don't hit that pause button, and that doesn't mean hitting it and then going away for 5 or 6 hours, but it means just stopping long enough to consider what the situation is. What are the main considerations? What are your obligations? What are the potential consequences? And then you can start to make an ethical decision.
Yeah, that is so true. Just that little pause helps so much. And I'm wondering, in your piece, you talked about reducing the emotional stress. Is it just the pause button, or are there other ways that, sometimes when things go wrong, it bubbles up into crisis? And that's a whole different scenario when ethics and crisis are going on. So are there other ways to sort of reduce emotional stress, pressure?
Yes, I think there are many ways. And of course, it's different for every person and every organization. Building on, what Ken said is you need to have that trusted group around you that you can rely on, because it's often difficult to make an ethical decision on your own. You have your gut, but unless you have a framework, and this goes to, the study of philosophy, you need to decide if you're going to make a duty-based or deontological decision based on a moral duty, or if you're going to base it on, consequentialism or utilitarianism, the most good for the most people. And both have their pluses and minuses. The thing is, there's no one right answer. There's lots of wrong answers that you could follow, but there's no one right answer, and you need to really weigh all the options and take that time to think through it. And just by having a system in place, I think that gives you that framework that I mentioned that you can use to step back a little and have a bit of objectivity in what's often a very, very tense and stressful situation.
Absolutely. Richard, any thoughts there about the decision-making process, especially when there's a lot of pressure?
And we shouldn't underestimate the hazards of short-term thinking. So, I would just completely echo the mentor that I wish I had when I was a 20-year sales executive, which is what Martin shared. Hit the pause button when you're not sure. It gives you time, it gives you perspective, and it helps to make sure that what's immediately important, like our goals, our deadlines, our objectives, doesn't overwhelm what's fundamentally important, like ethical and responsible business practices. So, there's a ton of research, Deirdre, and Martin and I had some tweets about this, about how more deliberative, slower thinking leads to more ethical decision-making, right? That's what's often called system 2 thinking. So I didn't hit the pause button when I was a sales executive, but I do now in my corporate work, in my personal life. I'm finding myself having to slow down to think about my decisions and my decision-making. And rereading the piece from Martin reminded me, I still don't do it often enough.
So system 2 thinking, I'm almost positive in that book, Super Forecasting, I think I mentioned that to you, by Dan Gardner and Phil Tetlock. They talk about system 1 is that inward view when you're trying to, it's getting beyond the nose perspective when we're trying to look at a problem. And system 2 is really looking outward and dissecting and looking at everything more broadly and getting deeper perspectives outwardly. So absolutely system 2. Richard, would you say that was your best advice, the hit the pause button like Martin?
Absolutely. Hit the pause button, and going back to our prior discussion with Ken, have an accountability partner. When you hit the pause button, you're looking for perspective. You're looking for deeper thought and engagement on an issue. So have that private board of directors so that when you hit the pause button, you're not going to subject yourself to groupthink and maybe answer your own questions. Seek outside support. It's there.
Absolutely. Well, I would say that the best advice for me, although I didn't apply it in terms of ethics, my senior vice president at my first agency told me to really tune in, that I have to listen so closely and take it all in, open my eyes, open up my ears. And if I could do that, I would be able to solve problems and see so many different perspectives. And when you tune in, you make less mistakes. And that's preventative so that we, will carry our ethics and ethical conduct because we're so tuned in. Because we make mistakes clearly when we're going too fast and we're really not paying attention. That's when mistakes happen.
Deirdre, when I talk to sales teams, my main message is exactly what we've talked about, which is slow down, reach out for support, don't unpack ethical dilemmas on your own, unpack them with a team so that what you theoretically want to happen in terms of your decision making, by that slower, more deliberative thinking, I think it increases the probability that it actually happens.
Exactly. That intentional thinking, slow down. Well, it's so good that you're doing what you're doing, Richard, because you're speaking from experience. And I'm sure that people really appreciate that. And it's helpful.
Thank you.
And I know I see you on Instagram. Maybe your travel has been cut down because of COVID, but pre-COVID, you were all over speaking and really helping. So.
Well, I'm looking forward to the days where we can all have our wings back and be back together, Deirdre, as we've been in Washington, D.C. and in Jacksonville. And I think step by step, we're getting there.
Absolutely. Well, Martin, any parting thoughts before we pop you back in the green room and have our next guest come in?
Yes, two quick ones. The first one, is hit the pause button. We're just talking about social media. Hit the pause button really applies to social media too,
Oh gosh.
because it would probably stop so many of the errors that the needless errors that happen. That's the first thing. The second thing is I'm a little more lowbrow than Ken, who suggested, a feature film. I would say if you want to get a handle on ethics, watch The Good Place, especially season 1. There is so much fantastic advice. I actually was watching it when I was taking the ethics course, and it helps explain things in an understandable way.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Is The Good Place on Netflix?
Yes, it is, I believe.
All right. Well, I'm going to check that one out. So thank you. Well, Martin, we will see you in a little bit and popping you out. So see you.
Bye.
So thanks, Martin.
Thanks, Martin. Okay, so we're ready for our next guest who's going to join the broadcast. We have Jason Mollica, who is a professor, and he's also the program director for the online master's degree for strategic comms at American University. So let's get Jason in here. Hi, Jason.
Hey, how's everyone doing? Hello, Richard. Hello, Deirdre. Good to see you.
Hello. It's great to see you. And is this the first time the two of you are meeting?
Unfortunately, yes, it is. I wish we had met in person, but now I feel very underdressed because Richard is looking resplendent in his with the tie, and I only have a shirt without a tie on. So I'm sorry. I should, but I am wearing blue, so I'm trying to match the book a little bit.
As long as you're in the blue code, you're good, and we think you look great, Jason. So thank you. We're just happy that you're here. And it's so nice to get your perspective because you're doing a lot in the classroom. And maybe that's where we'll start with Q&A. Richard, you're up with the first question.
Well, Jason, it's a pleasure to meet you. We've had some social media handshakes, so it's nice to have a virtual handshake.
Same here.
Thank you. So speaking about your students, how do you educate students to always do the right thing, especially when no one's looking?
Oh, that's an absolutely outstanding question. It's funny. I've probably talked about ethics and how you go about maintaining an ethical standard more in the last number of years, unfortunately, than I would have liked. Students ask, what do we do when we see the examples of unethical behavior in front of us? And I always say, if you can end up feeling good about that decision to uphold your own ethical standards, things that you learned from your parents, your grandparents, good friends, or even mentors, things that in your heart and in your belly and in your mind that are true and are not, basically, kind of a window dressing, then it should make it easier for you to make that decision to say, I'm not going to cross that line. Let someone else do it. And let the mistake and let the wall fall on them. And so, but it is a very tough thing to tell a young professional. How do you tell someone that has only experienced 2 internships to say, nope, stand up for yourself against that person with 15 to 20 years experience? It's not easy. And I relate my own stories about, trying to maintain ethical standards. The one thing I will say, and yes, it did come, later in my career when I was in television and radio, was my boss always told me this. And he said, I'd rather you be last and right than first and wrong. And to me, that is something that can be related to ethics as well. If you're the last person to get the right answer out there, the most accurate answer, that means you're upholding your own ethical standards to say, I'm not just going to shove something out there and hopefully it sticks. I want to make sure that it's the most accurate, the most trustworthy, transparent thing to do or statement to put out. And if you can do that, then you're not going to have to worry most of the time about backtracking. So I would say I try my best to tell the students that, look, that first time you're presented with this situation where you have to maintain your ethical standards, there is going to be a lot of sweat. There's going to be a lot of stomach churning. But at the end of the day, if you get let go from a job, or you end up getting fired because the person that fires you felt that, well, you didn't take one for the team, you don't need to be working there. And you can learn a lot more from people by making a mistake instead of making an ethical error, because ethical error shouldn't be in the same sentence. Mistake is okay. Ethical errors should never be uttered in the same sentence.
Right. No, you make a lot of great points. So last to be right rather than first to be wrong. Mm-hmm. I agree 100%. And social media breeds the feeling of gotta get it out. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the questions and answers in the book really had to do with checking what you're retweeting and who you're supporting when you go out there and communicate, because it has to be beyond just what you see. You have to dig a little bit deeper. You might be retweeting a bot. It could be fake news. It's not a real source. There's no statistics. There's no experts quoted. Being much more careful. Richard, any thoughts on the whole social media and really trying to get it out there and conduct?
It's a great dilemma right now, especially for compliance teams. That we can, it'd be interesting to see what Jason says about this, because if you have your personal Twitter account, for example, or your personal Instagram account, I think in our hyper-transparent world, like it or not, we have brand ambassadors. So it's not just as simple as, well, that's my personal Twitter account. I can retweet, and DM whoever I want. We really need to appreciate that whatever we do on social media, while it's representing our personal issues and things that we're passionate about, we're also organizational brand ambassadors. So it's a much deeper and wider conversation than, well, that's just my personal, social media channel. We need to think about, well, what is that saying for your organization?
That is so true. A lot of professionals don't realize, even just having the name of their company in their profile, that they stand as a representative. So you carry your brand with you and your companies as well. So, and Jason, I'm just curious. I've been doing a lot of work around millennials and also looking at Gen Z who are in mm-hmm. college. Are you getting the feeling that the comments that they have, that maybe younger generations will question more, that they won't just take things at face value? I've had a couple interns on teams recently who literally said, stop, wait, why? And I put it in the book. Why are we doing this? This doesn't make sense right now. And we're like, okay. So do you see that from students? Are they questioning more, especially around ethics?
I think so. And maybe it's a small sample size, but I would say since we had been online a lot, having to be, all classes were online, and meeting with students and, Zooming with them, weekly, and having conversations with them, you could see that they were, not that they wouldn't have done this even if there wasn't a pandemic, but you could really see that it was weighing on students, that they were bothered by what was going on and seeing unethical behavior. And there would be questions about, what's going on around this, and why are we seeing this? And they wanted to be the ones that were, maybe they weren't taking up the flag and marching down the street to say we need more, we stand for ethics. But it is something that I was impressed with, to see that, yeah, there are a lot of students, and not just communications, people, students that are looking at strategic communications. It's across all the fields, in many ways, that students, young people do want, in many ways, they want to be able to trust, and they want to see transparency with the brands they believe in. We've all seen the studies. We've read it from, whether it's whether it's this study or another study from another company that says, young people want something. They want to feel like their brands are active. They want to feel like they can support a brand if they stand for something politically, or whether it just be a simple issue, at least, whether it's more green, more green space or things along those. So
they have a cause.
Right. And that's a point where, when in talking with students, you do see how important it is to them to be to feel like they are making an impact. And honestly, getting a chance to talk with certain students over the last 16 months, be online more than in the classroom, obviously, you can see that they are really activated. They have taken a real interest in making sure that as we move forward here, we see more ethical behavior. I think people, especially young people, are tired of hearing and seeing the same things happening, seeing the constant negative nature of how things are going. And I'm not just talking politics, obviously. I'm talking about how things are communicated. And on social, let's be honest, we see a lot of, vitriol. And I think young people are tired of that. They want to be able to, go online and share things about themselves, but they also want to be able to feel like what they're saying is not frivolous. They have something to say. And when they have something to say that's worth it, they want to be heard and they want to be taken seriously. And I think in many ways they are continuing, or they are starting to be heard more seriously now, I think, than I would say in the past 20 years.
Excellent. Well, Jason, we're going to leave it at that, because leaving on the note of activated and want to be heard, it's a beautiful thing.
Sure is.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We're going to pop you in the green room and we'll see you for the Q&A. Thank you.
You got it.
Thanks, Jason.
Thank you.
All right. Well, guess who we have waiting to come on, Richard? Yours and my friend, Sheila Murphy.
All-star.
Sheila is such an all-star. So let's introduce Sheila. Sheila Murphy is a career and business development coach. She's the CEO of Foreword Consulting, and she's someone who lifts lawyers and leaders and legal organizations. And before Sheila started her own business, she was actually a senior VP and associate general counsel at MetLife for many years. So we're getting a lawyer's perspective now. And here we go. Welcome, Sheila. Hi.
Hi, it's so great to see you both. And I appreciate the fact that you left out how many years I was actually there. So.
I did that. Oh, it was just a few. Sheila, this is your second event tonight, right? Weren't you on another event somewhere?
I was just speaking at another event, but there's no place I'd rather be than with the two of you. So I'm happy to be here.
Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. We're thrilled to have you. And what we've been doing, we've been having different contributors in the book pop into the broadcast with us. And we have questions for you, of course, because my book is a Q&A book. So you ready for a couple questions?
Yeah, I am ready.
Awesome. So Richard, you get to queue up your question.
Well, thank you, Sheila. It's a pleasure to join you today. And I'm going to hold you to another one of our compliance coffees in New York sometime this summer.
Okay. I'm raring to go. I am ready to start meeting with people again.
Excellent. And I reread your contribution over the weekend, and something that was so foundational and inspirational was a part where you talked about what we don't say. So what would you say to a CEO or anyone in an organization's leadership that doesn't want to talk about ethics, that thinks that, well, that's part of a support function? The former Sheilas, that's what they need to be talking about.
It's a huge mistake. I mean, really, compliance starts at the tone at the top. And if people don't hear it from the CEOs, they will put in other notes as to what they think the CEO believes, especially if the CEO, as I think I mentioned as the business person I talk about in the book, was someone who talked about driving profits, returns on equity, all the financial things that put pressure on people to make those metrics. If you don't include a discussion on ethics, you are leading people to think that they are not important to the person at the top. And the other thing we have to remember is we're now going to this hybrid world. And in this hybrid world, people are going to be in and out of the office different days. They're going to be meeting in the room some days not. And you really want to make sure that those messages that ethics matters permeate the organization consistently. And there's no better way to do that than from the CEO. And you don't have to be in the room. It can be a video. It can be some messages you send out. There's so many ways that they can communicate that doesn't take away from other messages, but enhances what the company is about. And when you don't have that from the CEO, people will make mistakes. And those mistakes can be very costly to an organization, not just from a financial, but reputational place. So I really think that if CEOs and other top business leaders aren't making ethics and compliance part of what they discuss more frequently as we move forward into this new normal, then they're making a mistake.
Absolutely. That's a great point.
And I agree with that as former commercial Richard and current compliance Richard. Right on.
No, you when people, and also to be honest, lining up compensation with compliance is important, especially when you have people where it may not be front of mind in their job. And for a while there, I know certain organizations, and I thought it was really smart, especially with their sales forces, which, are very compensation driven, they started putting in a compliance component to their pay. And I thought that really kept everyone at least focused on the idea that this matters.
Yes, definitely. Sheila, there was something else that you wrote in your contribution. I'm actually going to quote it because I thought it was really interesting, and I'm hoping that you can elaborate on it. You said, just because we, and I know you were speaking as lawyers, can make an argument doesn't mean we should. What do you mean by that?
A lot of times, attorneys want to be right. We love being right. We love being clever. We love finding some little loophole. And the point was, especially when you're an in-house counsel and you're part of the company, just because there's an argument to be made to defend an action, or there's an argument to be made that you can do something or try to do something, if it is something that hits you as not ethically right on the mark, then you may have an obligation to sort of speak about that piece too, because especially when you're in-house, you are part of the company. And making people aware, we can make an argument, but you're going to lose in the court of public opinion. Or we can make an argument and we might win, but is that really who we are as an organization? And is that the message that we want to send? I think it's really critical that people not just think about being clever or winning, but also that you think about as an organization doing the right thing and having the courage to say it. As a lawyer, as a compliance person, as the lower level business person at the table, just because you might be able to do something doesn't mean you should.
Right. No, that's a really good explanation. Thank you. And, I just wondered, because to go from a company where you stated in your book about the CEO who didn't speak about ethics, and the company was very profit driven, and maybe
I didn't say it was my company, the CEO.
A company. Right? Sorry.
Right.
So a company.
I just want to make that clear.
Yes, definitely. So whatever company it was, if that's the culture, so you're talking about culture now, and it takes a long time for the culture to be rooted in an organization. Do you need more than just a few times that the CEO sends something out? Is this more change management and a process that you really have to go through to make this change happen?
A lot of people do Gallup surveys of employees and measure engagement and how employees feel about things. And one of the things is about the ethics of organizations. And when that comes out low, organizations really need to take a hard look at what they're doing. And when you look at changing a culture, that can take up to 10 years. It is not a quick fix. And so it really is embedding a cultural change in a change management system. And that's where most initiatives fail, is people roll this out, the CEO sends out a few videos and this, but he does, it's not a constant theme about what they're talking about. The message isn't cascaded down. People aren't rewarded for doing the right thing. I don't remember, I think it was in the Tylenol, when there was a guy who stopped the Tylenol for going out, and he was a lower level. They touted that person. Someone did the right thing and they got rewarded and they were brought in, and praised. And so you have to make sure that you're sending the right messages, not just sending out notes, but you're really reinforcing that with your actions, that you are rewarding and touting people that do the right thing and not just the people who are bringing in the money at any cost. And so you have to have a system, you have to be tenacious about it, and you have to realize that it doesn't happen overnight. And I would say if you're doing polling and you realize you have an issue, that you probably need to do some frequent touch polls to see if it's going in the right direction, because you really are talking about a cultural change that makes a difference. And you may have to make tough decisions in your leadership if people aren't supporting this type of initiative, because again, the cost to companies when you don't have an ethical organization is more dramatic than just the dollars.
Right. Richard, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I wish you could align my image with Sheila's vertically, because we're so aligned on everything that she had to say. And I mean, there's just saying that do the right thing, just say no to bribery. That's not a policy. As Sheila said, that's a wall poster. Like, that doesn't operationalize anything. And when ethics and integrity and responsible business practices are coming out of the voice of leadership, out of the corporate narrative, not just out of the former Sheila narrative, it just sounds so louder to the workforce, because it's sending the message that doing the right thing isn't a support function. It's how we do things around here. And there's some deep research about, and this is something that Sheila addressed, if we think of ethical and compliant business decisions as just policies, rules, and procedures, that can actually distort our decision-making instead of helping it, because we think, wow, if there's not a rule for this, it means it's a permissible interaction. And as Sheila referred to, especially in this environment, we have seen so many lawful but awful decisions that have had catastrophic consequences to good organizations and what we might think of as world-class brands. They have taken some serious hits to their reputation because of that, just policies, rules, and procedures. Here's the code. Here's what you need to know. You're good to go.
Right. And just to jump on what Richard was also saying is, I also remember when leaders that I know took positions that were financially harmful to the company because they were the right thing, and people became aware of it, it was much more impactful than a wall poster. Having people make decisions based on what's the right thing to do and making sure that's touted, even though it might hurt earnings. So you're down a cent in earnings because of that decision. But those things do matter to analysts. So when companies stand up and say, we're going to do the right thing, and leaders do, it does impact people and how they look at things.
Yes, I definitely think it's moving past the wall posters and the handbooks and demonstrating your ethics and all the people you serve. And sometimes it's the people over profit in certain instances. So thank you, Sheila. Thank you very much for all of your insights. And we're going to pop you into the green room because we have...
Bye, guys.
Bye. We have WinnieSun coming on. We'll see you again soon, Sheila.
Thank you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay. Well, guess what? We have our final rock star guest joining us. And Richard, you know Winnie, right? You've sort of communicated with her before.
Also, we've had a number of social media handshakes, so I'm so excited that she'll be joining us.
Excellent. Well, I'm excited to introduce WinnieSun. She is the founding partner and managing director of Sun Group Wealth Partners. Now, Winnie is also a Forbes contributor, and she sits on the CNBC Digital Financial Advisor Council. So let's bring Winnie in.
Hello, my friends. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing so well, Winnie.
Let me move over for you because I can see.
I know, I'm constantly trying to get myself centered. Well, now you get to officially meet Richard. It's not just a social media handshake.
Hello, Richard. Huge hello to you.
Well, Winnie, it's great to have you with us because you come with not only your social perspective and as a financial advisor, but somebody who's in the media. You're a media personality, and you know what we've been doing, a little Q&A with our special guests. So Richard has the first question for you.
And Winnie, I've had the opportunity to watch some of your live streams and some of your interviews. So it's such a pleasure to meet you. And given that you're on TV and other different media outlets, what do you consider to be your ethical responsibility or someone's ethical responsibility as such a popular and well-known talking head, so to speak?
Well, Richard, that's so kind of you to say. I think being on television or being on video, you're right. We have a responsibility. We have an opportunity to use the platform for good, not only to share our messaging and what we do and what we like to grow our business, but it's an opportunity to share something of value so that if, one of my kids, maybe my 7-year-old walks into the room or your parent walks to the room, that whatever we're sharing is something of value and also appropriate and dignified and respectful. And I think we need more of that in media. And so I'm grateful to be a part of this.
Oh, it's so true. I mean, I always said that it was the mother or the grandmother test. Whatever you put out there, whatever you say, your mom, and Mom, I hope you're on this broadcast now. You taught me well that whatever you share should make your mother or parents or grandparents proud. That's really true. Winnie, I find in media, and I too go out and do interviews, certainly not as much as you do, but I also have a show, Women Worldwide, just like you have your show, Level Up. What do you do when you're being interviewed and somebody is just trying to pull something out of you, and you know that you're not able to share that? So maybe you could kind of give us some tips about that.
So, Juju, that's a great question. And it's something that I think when you first start off, you feel like you need to answer every question. And it might put you in a pickle. And Sheila had mentioned right before I got on here, the issue of compliance, right? So in my industry, there are certain things I can and cannot say. Fortunately, as you know, I have an amazing publicist who sets the groundwork usually before I even get on. However, that being said, we always have a choice on what comes out of our mouths. And so, you can share positivity, you can share value, but if it's something that isn't acceptable or isn't appropriate, and isn't something that you're going to be proud of, hearing yourself play back or get quoted on, you just don't say it. You answer the question in the way that you want to answer the question. And for better or worse, I think we all, I heard both of you talk about this, of having that North Star. You know where you stand, and no one show or one appearance should take that away from you, right? Your integrity needs to be rock solid, and that should be your consistency.
Absolutely. Richard, I'm actually going to ask you a question about this, because when you first started interviewing, I'm sure there were questions that you didn't want to be asked, and you had responses and a way to kind of move forward. Did you find that was happening?
I did, and when you played that introductory video, it reminded me of some of those early interviews on CCTV, on Al Jazeera, on CNBC. And, part of it, and we share this in some of our media training, Deirdre, is it's okay not to know.
Right.
Right. And sometimes someone can throw you a curveball, to use a US analogy, where they're trying to throw you off a little bit. And one of the things that I've learned to embrace is I'm not the best person to answer that question. You might want to talk to X, Y, and Z, who is really, really knowledgeable in that area. And I really learned to embrace that it's better to say, I might not be the best person for that, than try to wing it. Better not be on TV than just, go for it. And one of the things that Deirdre gave me an appreciation for is a lot of the producers and journalists I've been interviewed in the Financial Times and the New York Times, they are a lot more willing, if you put the effort in, to talk to them and to understand what their approach is to a particular interview, what they're thinking about, maybe to do some reading, look at what's been going on in that subject matter area before the interview, so you're well prepared. But the worst thing to do is just to try to wing it if you're not sure. And if they're asking you a question that you find inappropriate, there's always polite ways of responding and then pivoting to something positive that you are there to talk about.
That's right, the pivot. It's the know you're in uncomfortable territory, move to more comfortable, and then redirect. That's that pivot that's so important. Well, Winnie, any final thoughts? Because we're actually at the top of the hour and we can bring everybody in for Q&A, but I want to give you any parting thoughts about media interviews or anything that you want to share.
I love the topic. I think it's really important. I think it's really relevant. We need more of this. We need to think about this and take our platforms with responsibility and take it in a direction that I think will benefit not only us today, but our children and the next generation as well. So I'm glad we're having this conversation because I think there's just going to be more mediums of communication. So we might as well start to get really good at it.
Well, thank you, and well said. So at this point, I want to remind everybody watching that if you do have questions, to please put them in the comments area if you're on YouTube or if you're on Facebook. And at this time, I'm just going to bring everybody back in and see how we all fit. Let's see. All right. Is the gang all here? Yes. Well, hello, everybody. Thank you so much for staying for the Q&A portion. And I'm just going to scan to see if we have any questions. So just bear with me a second. And okay. So here we go. All right. There's actually a question for Martin. All right, Martin, you're up. Are you ready?
I think so. Yeah.
What happens if your company has an ethical breach? You've tried to counsel them and they don't want your advice. What you're doing, you think what they're doing goes against your values. What do you do?
I think that's a really tough challenge. And anyone who has worked for an organization that they don't own or run probably has faced something like that on a larger or a smaller level. And I think it comes down to personal values and knowing yourself and knowing where you're comfortable. And really, you may need to quit or leave. And you don't have to slam the door and scream and, burn bridges necessarily, but I think you can be honest and polite and know that there's going to be another opportunity around the corner. One thing I always say to students who are looking for a job is the only guarantee, of a new job is that you will leave it at some point. And hopefully you'll leave it for a new opportunity. But if you have to make that tough decision, you need to do it. And it's something I have made not only from an agency I worked for, but also from in a situation, an agency I owned. I can't get into that here, but it really depends on your beliefs and your ethics and being true to yourself, because, you have to look in the mirror.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And Ken, please jump in.
I was going to say, even though I only shave here, and here, and not that often, but that old proverbial cliche, you've got to be able to look at yourself in the mirror while shaving every day. That's always going to be with you. You may be with a company 5 years or 10 years or 2 months, but being able to say I did the right thing is really important. There are other organizations who will value you and your contributions and your talents. And life's short. So if need be, if you've really tried, then it's time to move on.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm going to echo that and say that at the end of the day, whatever happens, you want to have your integrity intact. That is the most important thing. Winnie, did you want to add to that?
I love everything that you said. I agree with that completely. And I've always believed that when one door closes, then usually 2 more will open up. So I think, stick with what is right. And like Martin mentioned, if you've tried everything, Ken mentioned, if you've tried everything that you've done and you still feel good about your decision, then it was the right decision for you.
Excellent. Well, we have a couple other questions coming in from Wendy. Wendy, thank you so much for your questions. So the first one is, do you think ethics can be taught? So let me throw that over to the professor. I know, Martin, you're a professor, but you already had a question. So Jason, can ethics be taught?
Firstly, not to steal Martin's thunder, because being up in Canada, I mean, come on, I will not argue anything with a Canadian, because I love Canada. Honestly, in all seriousness, I do think it can be taught. I think at any time if we allow ourselves to be taught, if we allow ourselves to kind of open up, and I'm coming at this from the perspective of, yes, I teach undergraduates, but I teach in the graduate program as well. And frankly, we've all been around professionals in some way. And I think we can see if someone is willing to say, look, I've made mistakes in the past, I need to make sure that my future is more, I hate to put it this way, more ethical, or you just want to be more transparent. You want to be able to be trusted. Well, yes, you can be taught how to do it the right way, how to make sure you're making the right steps. There are plenty of people that we've seen over time that have, what do we say? They made all these mistakes and then they came back and they were better in the back half of their lives or the back half of their career. So I wholeheartedly agree that ethics can be taught. The caveat is you have to be willing to put the work in to make and listen and be willing to say, look, the mistakes are in the past. I have to make sure that I'm aware of them or keep them top of mind. So that way, if something comes up in the future, I make sure not to go down that road again, and learning from what you know now, as opposed to leaning on everything that you learned was wrong in the past.
Yeah. Can I add a quick thing to that?
Sure.
That is, I'm teaching a digital reputation management class to professionals. Classes tomorrow night. Subject is ethics. So Jason, I'm glad to hear that I can teach it.
Excellent. Yes, definitely. I'm in that camp too. All right, here's another question. Do you have to possess EQ to be an ethical person? So I'd like to take that one, because I do think EQ is so important in your decision making, your ability to manage your own emotions so that you can tap into other people and what's going on. When we make decisions in business, we have to understand everything and the people. So it is important that we have our emotional quotient. It's the IQ and the EQ that equals success, and that is a part of being the ethical marketer. So I don't know if anybody wants to add to that.
I might push back a little. I've known some people with very low EQ who are very ethical.
Well, you can know.
They might not have been an effective leader, but they might have been ethical.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. So no, I appreciate the pushback. I would say that it can hurt.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's better to have, but some people have very low EQ and be very ethical.
Good.
Yeah, and I would add that I would just say that I hope that more of our next generation, our kids, are taught more EQ. I think that we need that should be as important as financial literacy in the classroom. Our kids need to learn more EQ.
Oh, definitely. Thumbs up there. I mean, I just know, Winnie, we've had conversations about younger generations, and they absolutely are looking for the people around them to be more caring and kind and have empathy. And that is all a part of emotional quotient and intelligence. So I hope and see that happening. Okay, let's see if we have any other questions. We got an I agree with you, Winnie. That was Wendy. So, and thank you, Jason, says Wendy also. Okay, Sheila, question for you. You were talking about organizations and ethics as conversations. What do you do if there are no ethics training at your company?
Then I think that's an opportunity for you to launch an initiative that can lead to your success. So when there is a vacuum, I think people want to fill it. And I think you want to raise it. And I think there's a lot of research that would back up taking that position and owning that initiative. And not only is it the right thing to do, it will probably benefit your career by taking that step.
Excellent. And Ken. Ken has a question.
Okay.
So Ken, because you help agency leaders, what's your best advice to an agency leader about a tough ethical decision?
Yeah. Make it. Make the right decision.
It's hard. Do it.
If you go within and you sit with yourself for a minute, you know the right thing to do. I worked for one leader where there was an ethical issue, and it was needing to speak the truth to a client about something very, very big. And the client had erred. And, for whatever reason, she quoted me and Bobby McGee, freedom's just another word, nothing left to lose. She just knew she had to make the ethical decision to tell the president of this company he could no longer play a role in a PR initiative because of some misjudgment, and it was around a contest, and it was about, we have to do it this way, and if we can't do it this way, you need to find another agency. And that was a very big economic decision. If we had parted ways with that client, it would have had real ramification. But she knew the right thing to do, and she did it. And I just so admired her, in that moment. So, most of us know the right thing to do. Do we have the courage to act on it?
All right, the courage. Well, thank you for sharing that story, Ken. And Winnie, here's one. Why don't you answer this? Because we were just talking about younger generations, children. Do you think that EQ and ethics can be learned from your parents? And that's from Wendy.
Well, Wendy, great question. I wholeheartedly believe it can be taught from your parents. I got 3 little ones downstairs, and I think every day that's something that we talk about. What's right, what's wrong, and how freeing it is to be right. To do the right thing, right? And that honesty and how you feel good about yourself. So I think, as adults, we know in our hearts whether the decision we're making is right or wrong. We choose to go whichever route that is. It's unfortunate in business. We're talking about ethics and business and PR and media and whatnot. And so often you see business leaders who sort of walk that fine line or that gray line, or maybe cross the line now and then. And I've met a lot of them in the financial industry. And unfortunately, I almost feel like there's probably more in our industry than other industries that maybe don't walk that very ethical line. And it's unfortunate, but I also see a lot of sadness and bitterness. So I think being ethical is also giving yourself that quality of life. You feel better when you're doing the right thing and doing the honest, good thing. So So Wendy, I mean, I love the question, but I do think wholeheartedly we can choose to teach this to our children, and we should, if we love our children, to give them the best future that they can have.
Well, I appreciate your answer, Winnie, because I too believe that it could be taught in the home. And the little children's book behind me, A Whisper from Noel, sort of talks about values and, you know, sharing feelings with your parents, and that should start early. Richard, I think you're going to get the last question of the evening. If someone in your professional circles is acting in a way that shows poor judgment, should you distance yourself from that person or brand?
Well, I believe that when we challenge ourselves, because, you know, one of the threads of this entire conversation is our values will inevitably be challenged. So when that moment happens, and if it's not with yourself, but with a colleague that you're observing, and this is a tricky response, but I think we can question someone's thinking about trust and ethics and integrity without sacrificing it. So I look at it as a muscle. The more we're challenging one another on issues of ethics and responsible business practices and doing the right thing, questioning each other, the more we're building up that individual and collective ethical success, you know, one decision at a time. Now, depending on what the specifics are of that individual's, you know, role, rank, and responsibility in an organization, that might put you in that spot that we've talked about today, which is this the right place for me? But I still think the first reaction to someone who might be doing the wrong thing is to challenge it, to talk about it, to unpack it as a team. And as one CEO once shared, and I still remember it, I think it was 4 or 5 years ago, he said to his entire sales force, the only problem I can't help you with is the one that you're keeping to yourself. So I think that's such a strong message of the more we're talking about this, even when we're struggling with an issue, the stronger we become.
That's such great advice. Challenge each other and build that muscle. So that, I think we're going to leave. We're going to end on that note. I do want to mention there was a comment, and I think it had to do, Sheila, there it was. Sheila, I've come from a family of attorneys. My prosecutor dad used to say you can only win your case if you can see the other side. Oh, do you agree? Just a quick answer there, Sheila.
Yes. I think you have to understand the other side and understand where people were coming from. And by understanding where people might be mistaken, it helps you influence them. And I think most people want to do the right thing. And so when you understand why they may be making some of those decisions or thinking about it, you can help guide them the right way. So I agree with that.
Excellent. All right. Well, let's do just very quickly. I'm going to call on each one of you. And if you can just share where you want people to connect with you, 1 or 2 places. Okay. So Winnie, let's start with you. Where do you want people to find you and connect with you?
Sure. Thank you. You can follow me on Twitter or LinkedIn. Very easy. Winnie like Winnie the Pooh, Sun like sun in the sky. And I would love to connect with you.
Great. Sheila, how about you?
I hate to follow because I'm not Winnie the Pooh or the sun in the sky. I'm just Sheila Murphy, but I am on LinkedIn, Sheila Murphy Focus Board on LinkedIn, or Sheila Murphy _ on Twitter.
Awesome. Okay. Martin.
Same Twitter and LinkedIn, Martin Waxman on both. And of course you can come to my house. I'll give you my, no.
Okay. Ken.
You can find me on LinkedIn, and I believe I'm there as Ken Jacobs with the initials you see under my name, PCC, CPC. And on Twitter, I am at Ken's Views, at Ken's Views.
Great. And Jason.
LinkedIn, it's my name, Jason Mollica. I'm pretty sure I'm the only one there, but I'm always surprised. And then on Twitter, it's at JAS, and Mollica is my last name. So
great.
Richard, feel free to connect.
Oh, thank you. And Richard, I'm going to hold you for just another moment. We're going to say goodbye to our special guests and contributors tonight. So thank you all so much. It was such a pleasure, and it was great having you in the broadcast, and you shared so many wonderful insights. So we'll say goodbye to, bye, Ken.
Thank you for having us.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, bye-bye. And okay, Richard. So now, of course, a big thank you to you for co-hosting. And where would you like people to find you?
Thank you, Deirdre. What an inspiring evening and morning for Winnie. So this has just been so many lessons learned, so much good leadership and thought leadership here. You can find me under my name under pretty much every social media channel. But if you take out your smart device and turn your camera on, Deirdre's going to be kind enough when I'm back in the green room to put up a QR code. And if you can scan that, you can sign up for my newsletter and connect with me on social media. It would be an honor and pleasure to continue this conversation.
Excellent. Well, and for me, I'm going to put up a slide myself. So we will now share our contact information. Richard, thank you very much. And a big thank you to all of you for tuning in to celebrate my book launch and for participating in this conversation. I'm sure there will be more passionate conversations around ethics to come. So thank you all and good night. And I'll share some contact information.
So long.
So long.